it is so incredible, Christen Press and Nichol Whiteman, to have you both here to have a conversation and bring the work and the discussions that were had at Equity Summit back home to LA. Obviously, you both are incredible leaders in your fields and beyond your fields in a fight for equity and through the lens of sport. And so thank you both for taking the time to talk with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. So I want to start with something that's really broad. And we're talking specifically about equity in sport as it pertains to women, but obviously there's so much more that comes with the term equity. I would love to start, Christen, with you and just get your perspective on where sport is at in this moment when it comes to the state of equity in sport.
Yeah, it's a great question to kick off this conversation. Excited to be a part of the Equity House Summit from Los Angeles, so that's kind of fun. But I think in my professional sports career, so even just speaking about the last 15 years, the amount of progress that we've made is enormous. And you see it happening across sports. Every sport has their own little moment, and it helps push up the other sports. And in a lot of ways, the Olympics is obviously everybody's opportunity to rise. And it's been so fun to see all of the incredible stories of triumphing women at these games. And you know, before that, this year, it was kind of the year of women's basketball, right? So there's a lot of breadth to it, right? Because each sport kind of has their own movement, but we're all interconnected. And that's what's so beautiful, I think, about women's sports is like the fandom, the movement. It transcends an individual team or organization. And we all have these shared values because simply women playing sports, which they weren't allowed to do not so long ago, is a symbol of progress. And I feel like people can feel that when they watch. They feel inspired watching women being celebrated, watching women be unashamed, watching women be powerful. Those things are just inspiring because there's not a lot of safe spaces in our world where that happens. And so I think we've seen just tremendous progress, and yet we have a long way to go. I always think of the Olympics as one of the most equitable events for men and women because that's how it was by design, especially in my sport when I compare it to FIFA and our World Cup, because there's such an enormous gap there. And we've still seen how discrimination on the basis of gender and race and sexual orientation has been pretty rampant, and gender identity throughout these Olympic Games. So even in the midst of women triumphing and, you know, Black athletes and athletes of color like triumphing in such beautiful ways, we're still, that's still kind of juxtaposed against these really harsh stories that are bringing to light how much progress is still needed.
That is incredibly well said, unsurprisingly, and so interesting, I think, to again be having this conversation against the backdrop of the Olympics. And of course, this is the first Olympics that reached gender parity in terms of the number of athletes participating between men and women, which is, you know, sort of a huge marker. But as you pointed out, so much more to do. Nichol, I know, you know, the work that you do with the Dodgers Foundation, so much of it is focused on youth, and I'm curious to get your perspective on how this drive for equity manifests in the youth space.
Yeah, just always so honored, frankly, to be invited to any conversations having anything to do with equity, because it's just why I do what I do every single day. And frankly, on the heels of the Olympics, what a fascinating time. And frankly, to be sitting here with Christen Press, I am just chills, if that makes sense. It probably makes sense to a lot of people, but just chills, honestly. So thank you for inviting me to this conversation. I generally feel like when we're thinking about equity in youth sports, I mean, there are just so many barriers. I think I'm most excited right now that the Olympics, college sports, professional teams and leagues are bringing a new excitement to sports that I think is really, really thrilling for youth, but they have to be able to access it. And I think that a lot of the work that I do on a daily basis is, how are we saying there is a massive pay-to-play market across almost all of the sports now? How do we remove those barriers for youth to be able to participate so that these amazing athletes that they are seeing, like a Christen Press and so many others, they feel like it's possible for them? And particularly when we think of young women, it's startling that there are many things that take us out of the game quicker than it will take a young man out of the game. And so we have to be even more intentional on the focus that we are giving our young girls to make sure that they stay in the game. The barriers that we identified, especially through our work at the Dodgers Foundation, are lack of coaches, sometimes lack of quality coaches, barriers to being able to pay, right? The registration fees alone to participate, the cost of uniforms and equipment, transportation to get to where you need to be. There are so many barriers when you think about the billion-dollar youth sports industry right now, that it's awesome that we're seeing all of these amazing athletes across phenomenal platforms like the Olympics and the college platforms and the professional leagues. We just have to continue to open the doors, frankly, and scream really loud about how, if we don't open access and figure out ways to let young kids in, we're not going to see them in those same places that they see themselves now, because they're excited. And, even the youth we serve in the baseball and softball space are telling us they're really excited, but they need a door open. I think about, I obviously work in baseball, but I was a soccer player my entire life. And, really, I was able to play because I went to high school on a scholarship, and I then therefore became was at a school where I could be a really amazing part of a really awesome soccer team. We have to figure out how we're giving that access through sports, but also through other venues like education, et cetera, and giving families some opportunities that then allow their kids to actually play. There's a lot of barriers at play here.
Yeah, it's so hard to hear that, even though I'm aware of it and grew up in this youth sport system, because especially with soccer, it costs nothing to play. You just need a ball, and I've seen balls made out of rags, and you can play. And so it's just very capitalistic and very Americanist to make it so hard.
Yes.
And it's such a shame, because it's
both
about the benefits that young people and adults get from sports, right, in terms of confidence and skills, but it's also the best talent that we have don't always have access to play. And so when you think of a game like the Olympics, and you think of, how we compete against other countries, and other countries often don't have these pay-to-play systems, we're not even getting the best of our talent. And then that kind of awkwardly twists on its head when it comes to women's sports. I can speak mostly on soccer, because actually our women's team is so much more well-resourced than so many other countries. And, the gender barrier is actually lower in America than other countries. And so then sometimes we're competing against countries, and we have that as an advantage. And so I like to think of it on a global level, how can we remove barriers in terms of finances, in terms of culture, in terms of all the different pieces that keep children and girls and youth of color out of sport.
Yeah, we absolutely have to make sure that we create collectives that are removing access because of finances, right? It just is what it is. To your point, Christen, soccer does not take a whole lot. Different in baseball, right? It takes the registration plus the uniforms and the equipment, and it's expensive. But there are sports like soccer, there are sports like basketball, where you're imagining it can't be that hard. But if your first point of entry, that registration fee, is overwhelming, it is hard. If the gas to get to the location for practice is a barrier, it is hard. And so I think that, oftentimes we see the glitz and glamour of it all, and we have to realize that that's important. We also have to think about sort of where our kids are today. And, the whole world is talking about it. We all have to talk about it. I mean, the mental health disparity is just wow, wow, wow. And a lot of people don't see that sport can be such a therapy. Sports can be so healing. And the message is there, but I don't think enough of our young women especially are getting the message that, wow, you can totally heal yourself through sports. And many of us did that growing up and didn't even know it. But now I love that we're talking about it and we're saying it. How we are figuring out how we use that messaging and that train of thought also to create more equity. I think more of us will come to the table at a much younger age.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Yeah. That's really powerful. And as I think about you saying, we have to stop creating collectives, right, that sort of perpetuate or benefit from this pay to play model. I think about the role of brands, whether that's a team, it's a governing body, or it's a brand, like Gatorade, who is a partner of ours. And, you have somebody like Gatorade that has put $8.5 million into specifically into girls' sports and engaged and served more than 250,000 girl athletes. What is the role of brands? And I think even beyond, what is the role of brands in this push for equity? Should this be the responsibility of brands? And if not, who?
Yeah. Our young people are looking at brands, so we have to take some responsibility. And I think you're right. It's responsibility. Like Gatorade, love it. The investment financially is very important. We cannot say that it isn't. It is very important. I think also just the inclusion, though, in the overall marketing efforts, and we've all seen it through some amazing Olympic ads and more, right, is the representation. Do people see themselves in brands' marketing efforts not on a one-off, like, oh, there goes one with us, but on a consistent, recurring basis that makes them feel included and a part of it all? I think that brands have a huge responsibility. And it's mutually beneficial. You send the right message, you impact the right person, but it impacts the brand in such a special way. And so to understand that promoting this idea of equity can actually really increase your brand equity, I think is something that, great brands have recognized, but it's the financial, but it's also the representation and all of their efforts.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that I actually think about the business of sports and all the various touch points from the, youth players, the fans, the athletes, the teams, the media companies, like ticket sales, all of the things. Everyone plays a role. And I don't know if it even matters whose role is the most important, right? Because we have to reimagine the entire business of women's sports so that it works for all people. And that is going to be a really hard movement. And that's, why we're sitting here having this conversation. It's no easy feat. Now, when I think about the role of brands, I actually think that, before as a player, I was, I would say early in my career, it was really commonly known that all of us made more money from endorsement deals than we did from our playing contracts, right? And on the men's side, that's opposite. And in an ideal business of women's sports environment, it should be the opposite, because that shows that our playing is valued for itself. And now as women athletes, we have to do this double duty where we have to be marketable, and we have to be well-spoken, and we have to do all these other things to get endorsements. We have to be actors, and we have to be, models, like all the things. It's like so crazy to be able to make professional sports a job, right? A job that can sustain our lifestyle. And so in a lot of ways, I do feel like brands kind of led. I also think that, I actually think that the kind of pitch of women's sports is like a really easy pitch now. I think if you are, trying to get investment, which I run a company called Re-Inc, and we're always investing, like every startup, right? And, they say, commerce is, not investable. Oh, media is not investable. That you get that, oh, the market's down. Membership subscriptions were like the one thing. They're like, no, not anymore. The two things that people are interested in, AI and women's sports. like across the board. Like, you don't have to pitch it because
Wow.
everybody's looking at the data and they're like, this is a good business. And I can buy a team for cheap. I can, run a league for cheap, and it's going to grow. And so I think part of that is because of, brands invested a bit earlier in the cycle. And now I think a lot of brands have opportunity to double up in that, because you're getting, the great reputation. We know that the generation below us really cares about values. We know that women's athletes are some of the most trusted brand ambassadors in the world because people get the most access to us. And so they feel like they know us, and so they trust us. And honestly, a lot of us won't endorse brands that we don't use and like. And so there's all these additional layers that I think just continue to point to the role that all of us have to do collectively together, to keep making progress and chipping away at the massive job we have ahead of us.
Yeah. I totally agree with you that it's not a hard sell by far. When I think about the Dodgers ownership group, particularly Mark Walter and Billie Jean King, who just started the Professional Women's Hockey League, and the success of that first season, and how you're just like, oh, wow, people want this. People want to see this. People want more of it. They want to watch it. Brands want to be attached to it. It's not a hard sell. And I just think like it is like our time, if you will, because the storytelling has been so fantastic. And so I think taking advantage of it and investing, you hit that word on the head, it's so important. Yeah, you got to kind of get in to be part of the solution. Yeah.
I would love, on the heels of that and talking about investing and basically people, sort of putting up their money, talk a little bit about allyship in this whole process. And knowing, Christen, you personally and as a player, and your work with the U.S. Women's National Team Players Association in the fight for equal pay. And so I'll do this in two parts, but Christen, on that front, and sort of what was it like to go through that with or without, say, the support of the federation or the men's side? And then Nichol, going to you, you work with a men's team, and be really, really curious to hear what the conversation is like from the men's baseball team about their role and their responsibility.
Yeah.
So I'll start with you, Christen.
So often when I have conversations like this, a lot of the chat is about like women, mentoring women, and the roles that we all have to uplift each other. And I always like to say, don't forget about the good men. And for me, as an athlete, in the early stages of like my life as an entrepreneur, having strong male mentorship has been really, really important. Largely because men have most of the experience and access. And so because of that, we cannot silo ourselves in, the first wave feminist movement. And so in that way, allyship is super important. I think it's tricky when I think about club sports, because there are pros and cons for a women's team being associated with a men's team. And I've seen it both ways. Obviously, Angel City is a stand-alone team. And so you get treated as the premier team. And, you train on your field when you want. And you don't have another locker room that you're looking at that's like 10 times the size and better. But also, when you're on a men's team, usually the infrastructure is there. And so there's a lot of wins that you can get easier, and maybe there's a nicer field and there's more money that can be allocated that way. And so it's a really tough question I think about in how do we want to build the Women's Sports Professional League, and do we want those attachments to men's teams? When it comes to specifically what you asked Kath about the fight for equal pay, I think that the reason that we had success in that fight was because of the entire world's support. And without the press and the fans, I do not think we would have achieved equal pay, and I do not think we would have settled for back pay or be where we are. It was our strongest element of our fight was the storytelling. And I share that because it's important for people who are organizing their own fights and movements to know that it's a really powerful tool that all of us have at some level in our arsenal, because the world is, social media. And so everyone has a platform. And I think in that process of capturing many people's hearts, it really did open up a good space for allyship. I think it put pressure on our men's national team to support us. I think some men, were very supportive from the start, outside of the men's national team, and just fans of the team to within. And I think those types of amplified messages really do help when we're talking about reaching demographics outside of the women's soccer core audience. And I think that was really important. And I also think all of the players, if we were being honest, would have liked more support. And we would have liked it earlier, and we would have liked it louder. But it is a process, and I don't think we ever depended on it because we didn't expect it. And I think, honestly, where society is today, we would now, and we do now, and we can continue to put that gentle pressure on our male allies to continue to equal the playing field.
Yeah. Wow. When we talk about allyship, I get really excited because while I work in a male-dominated baseball franchise, we are we want to be allies to the women's movement in every possible way, and I feel like our team really walks the talk. And ultimately, the way that we embrace our local women's sports teams, and the way we talk about our women's local sports teams and include our sports teams and invite the teams to the stadium and show off the athletes, it makes me really happy. We have an internal Women's Opportunity Network, which is the women's employee resource group within the organization. And we get a say in how we're coordinating those visits and what is necessary for us to be partnering with local teams. I mentioned before that our ownership group is so invested across the board in so many of the other teams. I love that Billie Jean King, the icon and the legend and the voice that she is part of the Dodgers ownership group, but also keeps the women's movement at the forefront for us in a baseball world. And that's really special. And it was also one of the most special moments in my 11-year career here that she was invited to join the ownership team, and I thought that spoke volumes for who we are and who we want to be and how we want to lift women up, even though baseball is, for men. And I think that the way we embrace the softball world is really, really important. And I love what we do, not just on the team level, but even on the foundation level, of really thinking about how we can increase participation in youth in softball, particularly youth softball, and how we can make it equitable, frankly, when we think about uniforms and what girls specifically need to advance, and building softball fields in the Los Angeles community, and bringing our top players out to open those fields and to break ground on those fields, to show support, for women's sports. I think that all of those things help to level the playing field. And they also increase fan support for those teams, which I think is really important. And I think that we can't take for granted the skills and the strength that the Dodger brand brings, and being able to say, hey, you all should go to Sparks games and you all should go to Angel City games. It's a really big deal. And we don't just say it once or twice, right? I think we are really supportive, and the entire franchise is sort of moving it forward in a way that I remember the first time we sort of started to do it, I was just so impressed by. And what's more impressive is that we're consistent in it, and the leadership of the team believes that this is what we should be doing. And it's exciting, those nights at the stadium, and when, our women athletes, local athletes are here, it's exciting. And I think that excitement transfers back to those stadiums, even in the way in which our players will go that way and support, etc. But it is an education tool, frankly, for some of our players who are just like, oh, wow, we should be as in women's sports as they are, in ours. And so it creates this like reciprocal thing and reciprocal respect, if you will, that I think is really, really important. She's the star player of this team. You're the star player of this team. You should be, in the same collaboratives, if you will. But I think it's really special that we really do walk the talk in terms of we are like, hey, we're going to be supportive of all the teams locally. And that means including the women team.
I think that's so cool and exciting to hear that you're so excited about it. Because I think that's what energy tells it all, right? Do you think that's normal for baseball organizations in this country?
I don't see it happening in every city across all other 29 clubs. It could be happening quieter, but that might be a problem, right? Because I think you have to be loud about how you're supporting the teams, because that's the thing that's going to bring more fans their way. That's the thing that's going to bring more people to understand who the players are. Just all of those things. I think we use our platform really well to highlight it and make it a thing, and it should be a thing.
And Kath, if you don't mind me asking one more question, Nichol, do you think that we need more women in men's sports? Because I was just like, in listening to this, I was thinking about all the ways that I think about men playing a role in women's sports, because that's like where I'm at. I'm in women's sports and I'm thinking like, are men helping us or hurting us? And I hate you or I love you, And what you were saying, it's almost like you're an undercover spy. And you can be making change from like a completely different angle.
Yes.
Which is probably really, really important.
Yep. I think we bring an empathy to the space that otherwise wouldn't be there. And that our perspective is so well, in my world, it's so well received, but so well needed. I actually feel like you're right. We are the spy. We're like the voice. We're like, let me tell you what you should be. And I think that, if you want to be successful today, it's important for, especially in the business of sports and behind the scenes and in our front offices, to have women, even if it is a male-dominated sport. I think our voices are important. I think that we bring a lot of the things that the education that's needed within the broader franchise. But I love the way you put it. We kind of are spies, but I think it's our job to be like, this is the right thing to do because I identify with these other women. It's really important. Here we go. And it might have been our experiences. There's a lot of people who are working in front offices for male-dominated teams who played sports, and so it was also their experience, whether that had stopped in high school or college or whatever, they understand like the power of what's happening on the other side. And so, wow, you also understand when you're here, we have all this access, we have all this power, we have all this strength on the male-dominated side. Why would we not use it to say, it's taking nothing away from you to say, let's share that. Nothing. Yeah.
I love all of that. And Christen, please feel free to ask more questions. Nichol, likewise. It's such a tremendous space to be in. And I'm really thankful to be a fly on the wall in this conversation. Really wanting to respect your time, even though I would love to keep listening to you all talk. I think this conversation has been amazing, even though brief, because we have touched on sort of the full journey of someone within sport, right? So talking about the youth system and what does equity look like there, talking about high school and college and the pro sphere, and then talking about what happens off the field, off the pitch, off the diamond, which is women in leadership roles and investment in women's sport. So given that whole context and like broad range of conversation, I would love if we could wrap up here, and I'll go to you first, Nichol, with what gives you the most hope in this moment about the course of equity and the possibility of equity across sport?
Wow. Undoubtedly, our young people and our young women, if I could be really specific. I am a first-generation college graduate, first-generation American. I had so much opportunity because so many organizations and so many spaces gave me a chance to be who I am today. And I don't take for granted that sitting here as the CEO of the Dodgers Foundation, like, there's no way without all of that. I love that this generation that is coming up has found their voice, and they are basically saying to us, you better listen. And I think sometimes it's hard to balance what we're listening to. But I think they just, more than ever, we used to say this even when we were growing up, they're the future. They are the future. They give me all the hope. And I think that they are basically making us listen, and that is going to lead to more equity, because we have to listen, and we're going to have to listen because they're like, you're going to listen. But I absolutely just feel like what gives me the best hope is the young people. I feel like where they have just found this bold voice that is tremendously, I think, positive for everybody's future, and frankly, the future of sports, equity, and I think the young women have got it.
I love your answer, because it's way better than mine. And I was like, wow, that's very wholesome. And I thought the opposite, which was what makes me the most hopeful, is that it's good business, and that people are seeing that it's good business, because our society is so motivated by money that if people have the opportunity to make money, like, they will begin to invest in women's sports. And so it was like the cynical side, and I'm going to teach the children.
What gives hope is all of this.
Yeah.
You are absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah, but it is inspiring. It is inspiring for every person to be pushing up as individuals, to get their voices heard from the bottom. And it's inspiring to have a little bit of a shift at the top, where the money and the power are. Those things just have been complacent and resting in one space for so long, that I think both things actually happening at the same time is a perfect storm. And I think that's why, Nicole, you said it earlier, like, this is the moment, and it feels like it. And, I'm excited to be a voice, and be an athlete in the time of women's sports. And we all have the pleasure of doing that, right? We all get to say, like, we were here, we were a part of this. And it's a lot to be proud of.
Yeah. Love it. Love it.
And that just highlights why it's so important to have different perspectives in the room, because that is the truth, is if you don't have both of those things, it doesn't work. So thank you both so much. I want to say, just lastly, before we wrap up, Nichol, you should know how very embraced we at Angel City have felt by the Dodgers. Being honored at your game, having our players attend Allie throughout the first pitch. It is seen and it is felt.
Yeah.
So, walking the walk for sure. And also inspired every damn day by the work that you do, Nichol, with the foundation.
Thank you.
You're the gold standard that we aspire to. And then, Christen, in case y'all haven't heard, CP23 is back. Not that she ever went anywhere. She's been here. But, Christen, if it is a joy and a privilege for you to be a part of this moment in women's sports, you are a part of why it is a joy and a privilege for everybody who is a fan of women's sports. So thank you both, truly, for taking the time to talk about a thing that we all care about, equity in sport. And I look forward to many more conversations just like this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Catherine. Thank you for setting up this stage for us. Really appreciate it.
Grazie.